making assumptions or jumping to conclusions by getting to an answer and realizing and not realizing that maybe you're not answering the actual question that it's asking you. So those are just two things to be aware of. And then also for this topic specifically, it's really important just to estimate when needed and to choose the closest answer choice. You'll notice when we go through a bunch of these questions that depending on how you have your conversions memorized, if you have a conversion memorized to just the nearest whole number and someone else has it memorized to 2 or 3 decimal places, you may end up with different solutions, but we're gonna need to estimate and then again, choose the one that's reasonable and have the closest answer choice. Okay, so that's something just to keep in mind for today. All right, so again, if you're just hopping in, if you have something to write with, piece of paper, a pen, and a calculator handy, that will be great so that you can follow along and we can do these together. Okay, so I'm going to pull up just a quick screen of a few of the many different conversions that you will want to know and have handy. This is, again, not an exhaustive list, just a few, and you'll notice that there's a lot of different types of conversions here. We have some things that go from the metric system to our standard English system. We have ones that go in the metric system where we have to deal with going from like down here milligrams to grams. So there's a few different kinds of conversions that we have to know, and this is just an example of some of them. So if you want to screenshot this, feel free. But again, this will also be available later on in the Facebook group and whatnot for you to look back on if you'd like. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and we're going to just start with that first question. And on each question, I've kind of given us the important conversion for us to know and or the formula. But again, we love when this is interactive. So if you have a different strategy or some other way that you figure these questions out, please feel free to share this. So you can either write it in the chat, or you can also use the raise hand function. And if you want to share that, I think that will be really beneficial for everyone. So I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to zoom in a little so we can see a little better. Okay, and our first question says convert 2 gallons to milliliters. So in the yellow down here, I have given our conversion that could be really helpful here. We would have to know that 1 gallon is approximately, okay, that's what this little symbol means, is just approximately 3,785 milliliters. So this is how I remember the conversion, and if you have it to a few different decimal places or whatever, that's fine. But really our process here for this one is just, well, if we know that's 1 gallon, 2 gallons will just be twice that. So we're just gonna do 2 times our 3,785, and this is a great opportunity. I stress this a lot, to just use the calculator and let it do all the hard work. So 2 times 3,785 gives us 7,570, okay? So when I look at my solutions, I don't see that exactly, but this is where that third tip comes in handy, and we have to just choose the answer that is the closest, the one that's most reasonable. So that would be this fourth solution here. Okay, so pretty straightforward conversion for this first example. John, feel free to jump in if anybody's sharing anything in the chat or has any questions or strategies to share as well.
Yes, will do.
Cool. Okay, so this one's pretty straightforward, knowing this conversion. And again, feel free to screenshot any of this stuff if you'd like, or this will be available to you later.
So someone was asking, how do you know that 1 gallon is 3,785?
For what I know, what I've had to use this for, it's just one of those things that I had to memorize. If anybody has any other tips or strategies or ways to get here, maybe something, if you know how many liters are in a gallon, that could be really helpful too.
Okay. Okay, so kind of expect that might be something you need to know.
Right, yeah, so that's the one thing with this topic that is gonna be really important, is just having like a core set of conversions that you have memorized that we can then manipulate to help us. So with this one, if you either knew how many liters were in a gallon, or if you knew that 1 gallon was this many milliliters, was 3,785. Okay, so just as, you know, as a math teacher, giving some strategies for how to study these things and how to memorize like this, you know, one of these lists or a more exhaustive list like this, you might want to just make flashcards, right? So that you can just go through and have those conversions become a little bit more fluent. So pretty straightforward for the first one. Hardest part is having the conversion down, right? So let's go ahead and check out, oops, let's check out the next one. Okay, so I'll show you two different ways to do this one because there might be two different ways to know this conversion. Convert 69 grams to ounces. Okay, so because this gives us grams and we want to know ounces, if we can remember this top conversion, okay, that could be really helpful because again, when we're going from grams to ounces in this case, if 1 gram is, in this case, it says 0.035 ounces, we would just multiply by that. So we just do 69 times 0.035. Okay, so when we do that, 0.035, we would get 2.415. All right, so that's one way to do this is if you have this conversion ingrained. Another way to do this, the little tip down here, is just to divide the grams by 28, and that'll help you get back to ounces because there are actually approximately 28 grams per ounce, which is another way to look at this conversion, but this is how I just have worded it because it helps with this problem a little bit more. So if I took the 69 grams and divided it by 28, okay, again, just plugging that in our calculator will be the quickest way to do that. I get 2.464. And both of these are just, I'm rounding from my calculator, but you'll notice that they're not the exact same, right? But now we can really have, either way we did this, we would just be able to choose which answer is more reasonable. So the more reasonable answer here would be 2.44. All right, so two different ways to approach this question depending on the way that you remember the conversion. Okay, so in this one, we're going to convert 15,000 grams to metric tons. Okay, so the conversion that we would need here is to know that 1 million grams is equal to 1 metric ton. So if we know that 1 million grams is 1 metric ton, there's a few different ways to set it up. And here, let me just show you. Again, I have put another little tip there is that when you have a conversion like that, in this case, if we want to get to how many metric tons that is, we can just divide by 1 million. So if I take 15,000 and divide it by 1 million, and just when you're putting it in your calculator, be careful. Make sure you get all of those zeros because you'll notice this question, the place value is super important. Okay. So when I do that, 15,000 divided by 1 million's got 6 zeros. Okay, and we get 0.015 metric tons. So definitely tricky when it comes to this, making sure that you put all the right amount of zeros in there. And then also just make sure, take a second and make sure you choose the right answer. 0.015 would have to be this one. Okay, so don't be tripped up by the fact that all these look so similar. Just take your time at that last step and make sure that you're choosing the right one.
Cool.
Awesome. Very good. Okay, so we've done some metric conversions. We have done some grams to ounces. We've done gallons to milliliters. And in our next question, we're going to deal with some length. So this one says convert 8 kilometers to feet. So I have my conversion here. Okay, I know that 1 kilometer is approximately 3,280 feet. So I'm going to give you all a second to try to figure out what 8 kilometers would be and choose the most reasonable answer that you see here. Okay, and if you're using a different strategy, again, feel free to share that. And I'll just give you about 15 seconds and then I will show you the correct answer.
Cool.
Okay.
So a few answers coming in for choice B. Most so far are for B.
Sounds good. Awesome. So when I use the conversion that I have here, my rounded one, in order to go from 1 kilometer to 8 kilometers, I just have to take this and multiply it by 8. So when I go through and multiply by 8, I get 26,240, and that is rounded, but if I'm using the answer that is most reasonable, that would definitely be option number 2. Beautiful.
Cool. And so for everybody, if you didn't see it in the chat, Emmy has put together some cheat sheets for conversions. Those links are in the chat, so if you just scroll up just a little bit, you should see those. All of you guys should just click that link so you can download it. There's also a big English section cheat sheet. So she spent a lot of time putting that together for you guys. So I want to make sure that you see that, and that's going to help you with these conversions and kind of, you know, what are all these things I need to remember? All that stuff is in that cheat sheet. The link is in the chat, so make sure you guys download that. And I don't want anybody to miss it. And then it should all go to your emails as well, but just wanted to point that out.
Awesome. That sounds like such a good resource.
It is.
Cool. All right, so the next question, we're going to switch it up a little bit and look at one of the formulas that you will need to know. So let me zoom in a little so you can see better. This question says, convert 100 degrees Fahrenheit to Celsius. So this formula here, I've put both the formulas from Celsius to Fahrenheit and then from Fahrenheit to Celsius here. And they're essentially inverses of each other. So it is, in all honesty, it's true. If you only know one of them, you would be okay. You would be able to plug in what you know and solve for the missing measurement that you need. But these are, you know, if you're able to memorize both, it can be a little bit easier to choose the appropriate one and just kind of plug it in, use your calculator and go. So in this case, because we're going from Fahrenheit to Celsius, okay, I'm going to choose that bottom one. And I'm just going to plug in what I know. So I'm just going to leave the degrees Celsius as C for now, and we'll come back and we'll solve for that. So C is going to be equal to 5/9 times, okay, so our degrees Fahrenheit is where we plug in the 100, subtract the 32, okay? And then now it's a matter of just knowing how to plug this into our calculator to solve. So here, the really important thing at this point is just to remember that we have to do that subtraction first. This might bring you back to like grade school, but if you remember PEMDAS and order of operations, we've got to do what's in these parentheses first. So I'm going to leave this 5/9 and I'm just going to figure out what is 100 minus 32. Okay, so 100 minus 32 will give me 68. Okay, and for me, again, I'm always just plugging this in my calculator because it's quicker, and you know I don't have to worry about the human error, especially when we're thinking about taking a time test, and that can be stressful. So now we basically just have to figure out, how do I do 5/9 times 68? So one quick tip here is just to do 5 times 68 and then divide it by 9, especially when we're, again, trying to use our calculator as much as we can to help us. 5 times 68 would be 340, and then I can just divide by 9. And when I do that, my answer is going to be, if you've plugged this in your calculator the same way I have, you'll get 3.7 repeating, or sorry, 37.7 repeating.
That looks like that's pretty much what everybody had as choice A. So good job,
Perfect.
everybody.
Awesome. So again, if these two formulas, good to know these, at least one of them. If you have them both memorized, that is awesome. If we have time later, maybe we'll come back and we'll do a Celsius to Fahrenheit just to check that out. So let's see what we've got next. All right, here is a different type of conversion. We've got to be able to go from our 12-hour clock time to military time. Right? So in this case, it says identify 6:20 a.m. in military time. So what's important here to note, okay, is that one thing that it's important to notice is that it says a.m., okay? So if it's a.m., that's where we have like the 0100, 0200. In this case, it would be 0600. So it'd be 06. Okay, and then the 20 And we put the little semicolon and then the 20 after that. All right, so because it's AM, we don't have to worry about the like adding 12 to something. We'll look at one of like that later. But when we have AM and we're going to military time, we're gonna have it look something like this. Okay, so that would be, again, this is one where it's just important to take that second and check, make sure that you are choosing the right option. This should be option number 3.
Cool. Yeah, so everybody's really cooking along here, and we're definitely moving through these.
We are.
Questions, you know, feel free to put them in here. I'm getting the sense everybody's kind of getting these answers correct. They're putting in the correct answer choices before Ashlee has even worked out these problems. So everybody seems to be doing really well on all these questions. Someone did say that they got lost on this one. Alejandra Pina is saying, you lost me on this one. Can you just do this one more time?
Absolutely, yeah. So because we're going to military time, okay, we want to convert to military time. If it is here, there's like, it's a little bit confusing to give rules specifically for this because there's a few little nuances. But basically, if we have AM here and it's after like, it's after midnight and it's like anything past midnight up until noon, we're going to have basically this first, let me highlight it here, this first part. Okay, we're basically just going to put a 0 in front of it. Okay, and instead of saying like 6 a.m., I would say 0600 hours, right? That's how I would say it in military time. So when we write it, that 6, then the colon and the 20 would just become 06, and then we drop the colon. We don't need that for this part, and then we have the 20. The second part here, let me just change, oh, that's wrong. Let me just change the color. Okay, the second part where now we have the seconds, right? This is basically hours, minutes, and then seconds. The seconds is going to go here after the colon. So the numbers don't look much different because it's AM. This one is a little bit more, a little bit easier just to kind of pull from the original question. But essentially, you are putting this in the format of hours, right? The first one is hours, and it's minutes to seconds. And when we convert that into military time, we drop that first colon. Let me move this out of the way. Maybe that can just go there. Okay, so tell me if that wasn't very clear, or if that helps a little bit.
Okay, Alejandra Pina says she gets it now and says thank you. So thanks for going over that.
No problem. All right, let's check out the next one. So this is another another straightforward conversion, just one that we hopefully have memorized. 1 meter is approximately 3.28 feet. And again, if you have something more rounded or more specific, feel free to use that. And I will just let you guys go ahead and try this one on your own, and then let's see what we get for some answers. So 6 meters to feet.
So Ashlee, I know, I think I have an idea of what the answer is. Well, I'll actually let you go before I ask my question because it'll kind of spoil it.
Okay. All right. Well, in this case, because I'm using this as my conversion, that's what I have memorized. I'm going to do just 6 times 3.28 and get 19.68, which happens to, this was the first time we've seen this here. It actually happens to be the exact one that we see. So that's a good way to check if it's reasonable. I
always thought 1 meter was 3 feet, but it's exactly 3.28 feet.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I've been, that's what I use in my like daily life, right? I know a meter is approximately 3 feet. However, it wouldn't be accurate enough for this question because if we thought, okay, I know it's approximately 3 feet and I multiply, that would give me 18 and would lead me to falsely believe that it should be this third option, right?
Yeah,
so,
I looked at it immediately. I thought it was C. I just said rounding it. It's 18. It's got to be C. And then I was like 3.28, and I just Googled it real quick, and sure enough, Google says it's exactly 3.28 feet. So definitely something for you guys to know. And again, that would be on that cheat sheet that we have. It'll kind of give you that exact thing. So this is a little nuance that would be important to know when you have a question like this.
Yeah, and I'm going to write that as a little note here. I'm going to just say, be careful of rounding too much for these conversions, because sometimes it's nice and easy to estimate and be able to round and use more, round easy numbers. But in a question like this, that could really throw you off. So the more specific you can be, the more accurate of a conversion that you can have memorized, the better. But that would just be, that's a really good point, John. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. All right, so I've got a couple more for us. This next question, there are a few different ways to solve. So I'm going to show you the quick way, and then I'm going to just show you a little trick that may come in handy when you're doing conversions of this sort.
And let me ask you, Ashley, Nice Guy Bry is asking, when would it be too much rounding? So like, yeah, I mean, good question, but I guess it's just more to just be conscious of,
Yeah, so like if we know, right, so this is one of the conversions that we had here. This is just a perfect example. If we know this is 3.28 and we just rounded to 3, we're really cutting off quite a bit of this in relation to how big it is. If I'm going to round 1,352,045 to 1,352, right? It's like, that's not going to change it too much. But because this is only 3.28 and we're rounding that to, if we just in our head rounded it to 3, that would be a pretty big like percentage of the number that I'm kind of just cutting off and pretending doesn't exist. But it's also just one of those things that, when we're rounding to whole numbers, sometimes that can be too much rounding. It's nice to have at least 1 or 2 decimals. I was thinking if we had left this at just 1 decimal, I wonder if that would have been enough. Yeah, even if we had just rounded this to like 1 decimal place, that would still give us a really accurate conversion. So yeah, I mean, there isn't a real specific answer for when you do too much rounding. When is it too much? But this is just a good thing to be aware of. Hopefully this brought some awareness to you that if you have been rounding to just nice, easy numbers to work with, that could kind of come back and bite you in the butt later. Cool. Anything else before we move on, or is that good?
Well, let's see. Nope, I think that's it for now.
Cool. All right. So again, this question, I'll give you the straightforward way to do it, and then I'll just give you a little trick to have in your back pocket for these type of conversions, so you won't have to necessarily memorize all of them. So we have to take 147 liters and convert this to kiloliters. All right, so I have my fact over here. 1 kiloliter is 1,000 liters. Okay, so how would I get from 147 liters to kiloliters? So one way to do this, okay, really when it comes to the metric system, we're often just moving the decimal, and you'll notice that all of these answers have a similar pattern, but it's a matter of now knowing, how far do I move it? So basically here, what we have to do is we basically just have to divide by 1,000. That'll be the way to kind of flip this conversion to be helpful. So I'll just write that down as one strategy here, is if we just divide by 1,000, that'll help us get there. So I'm just going to plug in 147 divided by 1,000, and I get 0.147. Okay, so my solution here would be this top answer. 0.147 kiloliters. And it's important to know and just like think, this is one of those questions that really having the understanding of like the size difference, the magnitude difference of liters to kiloliters or milliliters, all of those different ways that we can use the metric system here for the volume of a liquid. Liters are smaller than kiloliters, right? So if I have 147 liters, I have to know that that's smaller than 1 kiloliter. So kind of looking at all of these things, one way to do this is if you just kind of have that reasonableness, like kind of have that down, that could be helpful. Or here dividing by 1,000. So I'll see if there's any questions for that, and then I will give you another little strategy that might help stick.
Yeah, so several people look like they're in the same boat. They're asking, why divide? How do you know when to multiply versus divide? In conversion factors always, and someone's saying, in conversion factors always divide each factor opposite liters, kiloliters. But I'll let you explain it. How do you know when to divide and or multiply?
Yeah, so in this one, I knew I had to divide because the liters, again, that's like the smaller unit. So in order to get to kiloliters, which is a bigger unit, I'm going to have less of them. So the way to get to this number to be less, to be smaller, we would divide rather than multiply. Okay, so that's one way to do this. And I think maybe if I show you this other strategy that I use, I've used it since I was young and it just has stuck and it works for me. Maybe this will help if you're a little bit confused of when to multiply and when to divide. So I have shared this once before and it's kind of silly, but it works. So it is this mnemonic phrase, and it is King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk. So weird and silly, but this can help us with metric conversions, okay? So this only works for metric conversions, so let me also just add that as a little note here. Okay, so don't think that you can just use this whenever, but this works for metric conversions, okay? So basically what this is we're gonna take each of the first letters. So K, H, D. This B here is basically like going to be our base unit. So when we're doing the metric system, we might have grams, or we might have liters, or we might have meters, right? When we don't have like a prefix in the front, okay? That's our base, okay? So basically what these stand for, so we'd have kiloliters, hectoliters, I think this would be decaliters. I always forget these two. Again, this would just be the base. I'll just write that one, base. And then we'd have deciliters or centiliters and milliliters. Okay, so again, this works for grams, this works for meters, and this works for liters. Okay, so let me show you how this would work for this question. So let me just go back again. What are we going for? 147 liters is what we know. So because it's liters and there's no suffix, that's like the little, or sorry, prefix, the little part in front, that is just our base unit. So 147 is our base. I need to go to kiloliters. So I'm gonna basically start at the base and I'm gonna see how many hops, how many jumps do I need to make to get there? And it looks like we have to go 1, 2, 3. And it's important to note that I'm going to the left. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 to the left. So that tells me in the original number that I started with, I got to know where the decimal place is. So when it's a whole number, the decimal is always at the end. And I have to do the same number of jumps. 1, 2, 3. And my decimal will end right there. So if I write this number again, so you can see it a little better, 0.147. And then in this case, they had the 0 in front, which is fine, same thing. This can come in really handy. If you just have that mnemonic phrase, you can jot that down really quickly and then swoop. You don't have to ask yourself, do I need to multiply? Do I need to divide? Should it get bigger? Should it get smaller? You'll just follow this process and it'll tell you where to move the decimal. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that for a second, let you kind of like absorb that because that's kind of a lot, and I'm happy to explain it again or give you a different example. And also feel free to add in the chat if you've ever heard of this or used anything like this, if this brings back any memories, because I definitely learned this back in.
Yeah, I know. I definitely have heard that King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk. Someone else threw out in the chat, I asked them to give the full mnemonic for it, but it was KHDUDCM.
Oh, so U probably just stands for unit rather than what I use as base. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then Jeanette Molina asks, so the bigger the number you divide, so the bigger number is what gets divided.
If you're going, yeah, if you're going to what's a larger unit, a bigger unit, then you would have to divide. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so when I'm saying like larger or bigger, I'm talking about the magnitude, right? The magnitude, a kiloliter is bigger than a liter. So if you're going from smaller to bigger, you would have to divide.
Right, and that's just kind of knowing the metric system that, you know, milliliters, kiloliters, that all the way down the line.
Yeah, and that's, you know, this is really just based on that 10 number system, right? So we're always either multiplying by 10 or 100 or 1,000, or we're going the other way and we're dividing by 10 or 100 or 1,000. So that's why I really love this, because it kind of gets that stickiness of like pausing and not knowing, should I multiply or divide? It gets that question out of there and just allows you to have a process. So if you know that's something that gets you stuck and causes you to pause, this might be something that can come in really handy for you. So this is, let's kind of switch it back up, give us, again, just kind of a quicker one to try. Convert 10 quarts to fluid ounces. So it is important to know 1 quart is 32 ounces. So this one might be fairly automatic for you all. So feel free to put that in the chat. And then, John, when you see a few answers, if they're all coming in the same, let me know what you're getting.
Yep. All right. Yeah, and someone mentioned for that other one, you can definitely do it that way, but it's going to be a little more time to solve it that way. And with this test, it's definitely all about kind of answering questions as fast as you can. I know for the TEAS, it's something like 1 minute per question. So while there can be several different ways to solve a problem, you definitely want to be trying to identify the ways that are the fastest. All right, so it looks like everybody is throwing out D for the answer.
Perfect. Yep.
Pretty good.
Awesome. This is one where we just have to go from quarts to ounces. So we know 1 quart is 32 fluid ounces. We multiply it by 10, and that is our solution. And that also, we just bring up another good point when we talk about the timing of all of this. If it, you know, it averages out to about 1 minute per question, there will be some questions like this that you do in like 5 seconds, right? And when you can do some of these more automatically, it buys you time on some of those questions that take a little bit more thinking or are a little bit more drawn out, because then if you could do this in 5 seconds, you've earned yourself almost a whole nother minute on a different question, right? So really important to just have these facts, these conversions memorized. And again, like I said, flashcards might be a really great strategy, or, you know, feel free in the chat to throw out some other strategies that you're using to memorize these to help each other. Because that'll help you really do some of these really fast, and that'll buy you some time for some other questions.
Right. And Ashlee, I'm curious, so people are on here, there's a couple different nursing school entrance exams. So there's more than one type. There's the TEAS, the HESI, the Kaplan test. Different schools use different tests. For the most part, the math is similar, but not the same on all those tests. So with that said, what are some of the types of math problems or subjects or topics that generally can be longer to solve? I know word problems are one that can take a little bit longer. Are there other ones just for folks kind of listening to kind of be aware of, like, you know, some of this stuff can be done much faster, conversions. If you know that stuff, it goes quick. Is it like word problems, and are there other ones? Are there like linear equations that, what are some of the more time consuming type of math subjects and areas, geometry, just as like anecdotally?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's definitely dependent on you and your, you know, each individual person is going to have an easier time with different types of questions. But as we get into some of the higher level math, some of that stuff can just be a little bit more complicated and can take some more time, can be more than one step. Like a question, like even a conversion like this could get much more complicated if we're converting, you know, say we're converting miles per hour to feet per second or something like that, right? Like we could have conversions like that take more time and are more complicated because there's more steps. Also, like you said, there's linear equations, there's exponentials, there's things that are a little bit more higher level that may require you to kind of have more work in a way where it's like, you know, remember in school when everyone's always telling you, oh, show your work on your math tests, like writing out that stuff sometimes can take the longest, but you'll need to do it to be able to solve these questions. And also I was just thinking, like, again, with word problems, and we'll just like, I'm just hitting this home just so that you have it in mind, even though we haven't worked on that much today. Like reading through the word problems and really reading for understanding and answering the question that's asked. A lot of the times that can be the part that takes the longest. even more than just the math you have to do to solve it. So there's definitely a few, and again, like geometry you mentioned too, if we have to deal with geometry, we're dealing with formulas, we're dealing with maybe having to draw a picture. Some of those things can just take longer because again, it's not just an automatic thing that we can plug in our calculator. We might have to be working through some more things. So what is 1655? Okay, and then we've got the colon and then the 30. So this, if you look at it, this is in military time, and then we have to go into the 12-hour time clock. Okay, so take a second, look at this. Feel free to send it in the chat if you see it. The first thing that I notice when I look at this question is that the first two numbers, remember we talked about this before, that this is always going to be hour and then minute and then seconds. I notice that the hour is over 12. So because it's over 12, in military time, we don't like switch back. It's afternoon. They just continue to add. So I know that this is going to be PM because it's more than 12. That first number is more than 12. So this is a great strategy to use when you have a multiple choice test, is if you know one little piece of this already, like I know this has to be PM, I'm going to get rid of the AMs. Those are not my answers here. Okay. So that can just be one strategy you can use for this. And then the way to do this is basically you just do the 16 minus the 12, because since it's afternoon, we're going to get rid of those first 12 hours and we get 4. So I know that this is going to have to be 4, and then the minutes stay the same. Okay, and then my seconds stay the same. So 4, 55, 30, and again, we knew this was more than 12, so this had to be PM. So this is in the afternoon. So that would be our solution. And again, this would be a great one where even if you just had that first piece of information, you could get rid of the AMs, you know that's not correct. Then you can look at your two answers and just ask yourself which one is more reasonable, which one makes the most sense. And 16 minus 12 gives me the 4. That's how we get to answer number 3.
Cool, looks good. Everybody got the answer right on that one.
Perfect.
And they enjoyed that explanation and thought you did a really good job on it.
Cool, thank you. So I'm just gonna go back here real quick, and I'm just gonna screenshot this and bring this down to a new slide for us real quick. And what we did before, was a Fahrenheit to Celsius conversion. Let me just kind of make up a Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion for you, and we can give this a shot before we wrap up. So here's our formula. This time we're gonna use Celsius to Fahrenheit. So I am just gonna make up one, let's do 17 degrees. I don't know how to do a degree symbol on here. That's okay. 17 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. Okay, so I walked through the last one, so I'm going to let you guys kind of plug and chug this one. Again, if you only have one of these memorized and you want to use one specifically, go for it. And if now that you have these in front of you, it would be a bit quicker and easier to use this first formula to start, to go from Celsius to Fahrenheit. And then I just made this up, so I'm going to do it along with you, but I won't really say much. I'll let you guys kind of do it, and feel free to check in as you go.
Cool, so I love people are coming in with the answer when there's not even a multiple choice option.
Love it.
Most folks have 62.6, so I think.
Oops, that's what I was getting, and I typed it wrong. Yep, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so as you go here, another thing just to note when we do these, it's just important, right? Make sure you do it in the right order. So we had to go through and multiply first. That gave me the 30.6, and then I could add that 32 onto it and give me 62.6, and that would be degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so awesome.
So Jamaican Girl Kitchen, by the way, I love your TikTok. I watched all your videos. I love Jamaican food. I do my own jerk chicken probably like once a month, actually in my backyard. I dig a hole in the ground. I do it yard man style. So I dig everything that you had on your TikTok. She wants to go over question number 4. She wants to go back to that one, the 4th problem that you did.
Okay, was it
jerk to the world, someone said.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay, I believe it should have been this one. please tell me if that is the right one, the one you were thinking of. 8 kilometers, 2 feet.
Is that the one, Jamaican Girl Kitchen, you were looking for? Let's just walk through it. Hopefully that's the one.
Okay, cool, awesome. So this is one where having this conversion memorized is really the key part here, to know that 1 kilometer is about 3,280 feet. So if I know 1 kilometer and I need to get to 8, I'm basically thinking, you know, this is just kind of to break it down a little bit. I'm essentially thinking 1 times 8 would get me to 8. Okay, so 3,280 times 8 would help me find how many feet. So essentially whatever I had to do to the kilometers to get to what I was given, I'm going to do that to the feet too. So I'm just going to plug in my calculator, 3,280 times 8, and that's how I was able to get to this answer here. So again, this is rounded. It's not exactly what I see, but then I just use the most reasonable answer, which is going to have to be answer number 2 in this case. Hopefully that cleared it up a little bit. Feel free to jump in again if there was anything else that I could help with.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Cool. All right. Sounds good.
And John, I know that you guys have been putting into the Facebook group some polls and whatnot about topics. So yeah, so please make sure you guys are throwing that in the mix too, so that we can make sure we're covering the things that are important to you.
Yep. Absolutely. And we asked that and it kind of ends up being all over the board. But if we get some sort of consistency in what people are looking for, we'll put in those topics. All right. So this is the online course. And this online course is composed of 8 practice tests. There are 100 video lessons kind of within all the lesson modules. There is a question bank that has something like 1,300 questions in it. And there is also hundreds of flashcards, and there's the actual lesson modules themselves. So that's kind of what we'll take a look at. So this is the online course. And once you're in here, you know, if you're not in our Facebook study group for the TEAS, the HESI, the Kaplan, we have a study group for each. Definitely join those. You guys are probably already in it, but we're almost up to 9,000 members in the TEAS Facebook study group. And all that really means is there are tons of people in there helping each other out. If you have questions on anything from how do I sign up? What was your experience at, you know, a particular school? I need help with a question, anything kind of related to the tests and getting into nursing school, tons and tons of support there. So I want you guys to check that out. So what we'll see is the course broken into the different sections. So, you know, you have reading and math and science and English. But within each, you know, kind of topic, you'll have the different lesson modules. So this is, you know, A&P, organization of systems, and you would have those particular systems there. And if we look at math, you know, you've got all those topics here. And you can jump into any of these particular lessons. So I'll jump into, I don't know, let's do standards of measure. And so this is going to be a typical lesson, and I'll just make this larger. So you kind of have the different content in here. You're gonna have practice questions throughout the lessons that kind of cover the material that you just learned. Then there's gonna be videos within the lesson as well. Some of you guys might be familiar with Brandon Kraft. He's an excellent resource for math. He's got a YouTube channel and some website and other good resources. So we actually partnered with him. He's one of the best instructors out there for math, specifically for the TEAS. So he did all the videos for Smart Edition Academy. He did about 50 math videos of our 100 videos. So a good portion of our video lessons are actually math. And so you can check those out, and he'll kind of cover these different topics. Working through a bunch of these, all the math topics on the test. And as we go through, yeah, you know, kind of different math questions, videos kind of interspersed in here. And, you know, you'd get to the end and there's a review. And I'll show you another example. Kind of a lot of the lessons are very interactive and quite a bit different from the book. So things that you can't really do in a study guide book. Now, we do have a study guide book on Amazon. You can get that there. Some of you guys might already have that. But one of the big differences with the online course is that there's just a lot of stuff in here that you can't do in a study guide book. So we'll kind of see that a lot of the questions, say in the cardiovascular lesson, are a lot more interactive than anything you can do in a book. So, you know, again, you'll have your lessons here, and I think these videos are something like 10 or 12 minutes. And they would kind of just go over all the stuff that's in the lesson. So if you like listening to things, or you're more visual and you like watching videos, you can opt to do that. And then as we go through the lesson, it'll kind of be lots of illustrations and graphics and things to kind of help you visualize what you're learning. Again, questions all within the actual lessons themselves. And then you'll get a lot more things like this that are kind of more interactive type questions. So this is like a place each event in the order that they occur, and you would have to drag these all around. Then you can check your answer. I obviously didn't do that correct, but you get the idea. You have to kind of order that. And all the questions on your test are going to be multiple choice, but that's not always the best way to learn. So we have different types of questions that kind of help you learn the material more so that you can answer those multiple choice questions better. Some things are like fill in the blank. I believe this is typo, might be just the O. I got it right. All right, so people with typo blood. So, you know, some fill in the blanks, and then there'll be a lot of like diagrams to label, and again, these kind of sorting things and dragging and dropping things in the right place. Lots of diagrams kind of with different illustrations labeling the heart and its system, EKGs, and you'd have to label what this EKG is on the chart there. And then you review all the main topics. And then again, probably the most important part for this lesson is you need to be very familiar with the heart and that entire system. So you would go ahead and start labeling this, starting at 1 all the way around, and put that in the right order. And then we can check that and make sure that you're right. Then at the end of each lesson, there are flashcards. And the flashcards at the end of each lesson are kind of broken down to the very specific. These are the cardiovascular flashcards. And when you go ahead and do these, you can mark them if you got them right or wrong. And if you got it right, it'll take it out of the deck. And if I got it wrong, it'll keep it in the deck. And I would just kind of keep going through these until I got them all right. And you'll see this number starts to go down. And if you refresh the lesson, it'll kind of start it over again. So you can kind of just drill into these flashcards until you've gotten all of them correct. So hopefully that all makes sense for you guys. We can take a look at the practice test. And so I think this is one of the more important areas for you guys to understand how this can help you. So one of the biggest aspects to the TEAS test, the HESI, the Kaplan, is that they're very long tests. So the TEAS is about 3.5 hours. And what you need to become familiar with, besides all the material and the content, is sitting for a 3-hour test. It's like running a marathon. So you wouldn't show up to a marathon on race day for the first time. You haven't ran 1 mile yet, or you've only ran 5 miles and you think you're going to do a whole 26-mile race. So this is similar. It's a 3.5-hour test. You want to have sat through a full practice test and do each section back to back to back to back, so that you're doing it for 3.5 hours and you're getting used to kind of having that mental endurance so that you can make it all the way to the end. So if I go ahead and I'll click on the science practice test, and when I start this text section, it's going to start the timer. So the TEAS science has 53 questions, 103 minutes, and I can go through and answer all these questions. You can flag these questions for review, like you can on the actual TEAS, so that you can go back to the question, which is something you can do in the TEAS test. So this is all kind of formatted very similar to the actual test. The way that the questions are asked, the difficulty of the questions are very similar to the TEAS. And we've made many, many iterations on these practice tests to make them very, very similar to the TEAS. I will go to the end. I'll answer this one, finish the test section, and this is going to bring up a scored report. So what this scored report does is, if I had taken the whole test, it'll give me my percentages broken down by each specific topic within science. So the cardio system, chemical bonds, the endocrine, genetics and DNA. And with this, I can get an idea of what my strengths and weaknesses are. I might see I got a 25% on cardiovascular. meaning I did not answer most of those questions correct. There's probably 3 or 4, of each of these questions. And if you're seeing that you got all of them wrong, that's going to be one of your weak areas. Those are the topics that you need to make sure that you're studying more, studying first, and that's how you're going to spend your time most effectively. And then you might see that you got 100% on a lot of these, and those are ones that you should be pretty comfortable with. Focus on the topics that you're not testing well on. So that's a really key factor into studying effectively and making sure that you're focusing on the right things. There's so much to know for this test. That's one of the best things you could do, is just really get organized and know what you need to be studying. So I'm going to go to view questions, and that is going to bring me to all the answer explanations. Now, about 3 or 4 months ago, we did a big overhaul of these answer explanations to make them much more detailed than what you might see in the book. And I mean, the reasoning is kind of, if you had these answer explanations in the book, it would be a 1,000-page book. It's already almost 400 pages. It's like 386, I think. So they would be a 1,000-page book, so you just can't do it. Same with those interactive questions. You just can't do it in a book. So it's one of the advantages of the online course. But you'll see these answer explanations are really detailed. They're going to include different illustrations and graphics and things that really help you understand why the answers are right or wrong. So that should help you guys out. So those are the practice tests. And one thing for the practice test is you can get an even more detailed score report. If I go to my test results, I'll maybe pull up this math test, and it's going to give me like a similar scored report. But what this is going to do is the same thing, where it breaks down on the math test. There were 4 questions on addition and subtraction of fractions. So I can see what those 4 questions were. I can get the answer explanations again. But what's really important is, especially for like math and reading, where answering the questions very quickly is very important. Reading, you have really long passages. You need to be able to answer those quickly. We actually time each individual question for how fast you're answering them. So I could see maybe I spent 1 minute and 30 seconds on this question. This one I spent 3 minutes on. This one I spent 15 seconds on. And what you should be able to pull out of this is, maybe you are on word problems and you're seeing that all your word problems are like over 2 minutes to solve those problems. That's way too long. And so you should be able to identify a few key areas that you might want to improve on, or at least be able to say, hey, when I got to those word problems, it slowed me down. Those are ones that I'm specifically going to try and get faster at. And I'm going to focus, purposely knowing these are questions that I need to get faster at. So those are the practice tests. And so what you might do is, okay, so let's say word problems was something that you identified. You're really slow on those. To read the problem, make an equation, solve the equation, you're not at that, say, 1 minute mark where you need to be. You can go into our practice question bank, which is organized by the topics. And different from the practice test, where if I take the math practice test, it's going to have all the different topics all mixed into one timed practice test, just like the real test. You can go into math here and see just solving real world problems. So here, I want to practice these word problems because that's what I need help in. I can do a whole set of just word problems. And in this case, there's 103 word problems. So more than enough to kind of get better at this particular section. So that is the question bank. And then the last thing is just these flashcards. So these are super helpful for you guys. The flashcards are in each lesson module. We kind of take a larger set of flashcards and we'll pull out just the flashcards for acids and bases or states of matter, and that'll be in the states of matter lesson. But what these flashcards at the end of the course are just going to be like larger sets. So this is the anatomy and physiology flashcard set. There's 259 flashcards in here, and that's going to include everything, right? So from this set, we break it out into its smaller pieces. But if you want to do the whole thing and just run through it and practice that anatomy and physiology, you can do that and run through this whole set. And it's going to be the same for like life and physical science, the biology stuff, the chemistry stuff. It'll kind of have those larger sets here. And then kind of same idea for, let's say, the English flashcards. It's going to have like the reading, language arts, and so kind of those bigger sets. So that's everything in the course. That's the lesson modules themselves, the video lessons, a lot of that interactive content, 8 practice tests. So really that should be enough practice tests for you. And it's really more practice tests than you'll see anywhere else in any other book or online course. It's really the most available to you. And all this stuff is, it never expires. So there's no subscriptions or anything like that. It's a one-time cost and you have this for as long as you need it. We hope you guys find value in Smart Edition and a lot of these other things that we do, like group tutoring that we do pretty regularly, our Facebook group. We have cheat sheets on our Pinterest page, we're on TikTok, Instagram, pretty much anywhere you guys are, we're trying to be there as well. Okay, cool. So I will see you guys all tomorrow. Have a great night.